Okay, good morning, all HPAIR delegates. For those of you sitting in Asia, in the Middle East, we got the evening on the East Coast of the United States. Some people joining us from the West Coast. Great to see all of you. My name is Martin Roll. I'm a business and brand strategist, work with brand strategy and a couple of other things, but I'm also on the board of HPAIR. So I'm very excited to moderate this first Monday HPAIR session. We got a very special guest today. Before we're getting into that, I'm just gonna encourage you, remind all of you to submit your questions throughout, and I will pick from the questions as we go along, and we'll definitely in the latter part of the session get to the questions that I know from the previous sessions in the past days here. We have had a lot of audience and delegates involvement and commitment here, so we will welcome you to submit your questions here as well. So I'm very excited here to welcome our guest for this Monday, who is Randy Freer. You will have seen Randy's CV from your invited in the program, but Randy has a very exciting background, and that's what we're going to examine today. We're gonna learn from our special guest. Randy is currently the CEO of the Freer company. We'll hear more about it. And he has a past position as CEO of Hulu, and also a long career with Fox as president, CEO of Fox and Fox Networks. So we surely have a person here that is deep into media, deep into entertainment, deep into sports. And Randy has also been mentioned as one of the most influential figures in the business of sports. So with those words, no further ado, Randy, warm welcome to HPAIR. It's good to have you with us.
Oh, thank you for those kind words, and it's great to be here. I'm thrilled and honored that Skylar would reach out. So I look forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. The same here. So I'm just going to ask to start you here. What's the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
There's so many great things that I've been told over the years, but I think I'll go back to when I was fairly young. And it was from my father, and what he told me was ultimately there are going to be people with better educations, with better families, with better contacts, with more money and smarter than me, and all of those things. But the one thing that I could control is how hard I worked, and to make sure that I let no one outwork me in the process for something that I wanted. And it's something that through my career I was able to apply and really put in the effort and time and find the resources to create a little bit of success along the way.
Fantastic. I think that piece of advice, or different pieces of advice, probably served you very well in your career. So that's a good starting point for the career track that you have. What really got you interested in the TV and in entertainment, live streaming industry in the first place? How did you get involved with that career track?
Well, when you start a career, it's not really a track. You start and you kind of ultimately over time you end up places. And Martin, you know that. It's not always as linear as you would hope. It looks perfect. Oftentimes it looks perfect when you look in the rearview mirror. But starting out, it was really, I loved news and politics and other things, and always wanted to work in the news business when I first started out. Ultimately, I got a job at a company with Turner Broadcasting called CNN back in the early days. And from there, I moved through sports and a number of other places. And I was lucky enough that even though I was working at big companies, I was always on somewhat of the edge of their innovation strategy, either through joint ventures or other things they were looking to do. So I always kept ahead of the curve. And when you think about television, when you think about entertainment, one of the interesting things is the entertainment business allows itself to be defined by the distribution technology rather than the product. It was broadcast, then it was cable, then it was satellite, then it was telco, and now it's streaming and IP delivered. So the ability to see a little bit ahead, the ability that Fox had to be engaged in the conversation, the ability to see what a difference you could make when you started to have real direct-to-consumer relationships, when you had real opportunities to build consumer affinity, and you became a retail business and a relationship business versus a wholesale business. that really excited me, ultimately led me to the board of Hulu, and in the end as CEO.
Fantastic. And when you look back, I mean, you have done so much in your career, Randy, but what are some of the most challenging projects that you have worked on and you took on during those years?
Wow, there was a lot of them, and I think there's a number of challenges along the way, and I think you can bucket it in a couple ways. One challenge that everyone will always face in their career and in their efforts is the reality that, you know, people matter, and you have to align yourself with the best people you can find. You have to have people you can learn from, who can learn from you, who you find have similar ambitions. So I think throughout my career, one of the challenges that I've been able to pull together is organizing teams, bringing quality people together, and then allowing them to thrive and grow. So I think that's one area that everyone will always find is a challenge, and you don't always get it right. You're not always 100% with the people that you bring into the equation. The other, probably the biggest challenge from just a business standpoint was in 1997, 1998, Fox started a joint venture with TCI, which is John Malone's Liberty Media now. And our challenge was to build a local sports business. At that time in the US, about 15 or 20% of all local sports events were available on TV. And our challenge was to go out and find a way to make them all available to the consumer. So we started that business as a joint venture. We went out to acquire rights. We had no distribution. We had no organization. We had a good group of people and a strong financial backing, and had to, one, persuade people that we had a real plan for the business, two, persuade people that we were actually going to show up and pay them at the end of each month. And then three, go out and win the competitive process of bidding that. So over the course of a decade, we were successful in creating a business that went from, when we first started it, actually the first year probably losing about $100 million, to over the first 10 years, a business that delivered every local sports event in the market to all consumers, and was a business that had an EBITDA of about $2 billion. So there were amazing challenges along the way, people, partners, economic, distribution, you name it. But that was one that really, over a long period of time, came together.
Fantastic. And sports surely changed throughout the 90s and into this millennium, and I guess keep
Right.
changing as well as the industry is changing. So what did you like the most about the industry? What was the most fascinating part of it?
To me, what I loved was just the business of sports back then. I can get to the business of entertainment at the same time. I mean, it was logical. You could do the math. You could predict where it was going. You also knew the importance of sports and technology as part of the expansion of the overall economic environment of television and content. It was passionate. So I think what, to me, what I loved the most was obviously the people who were engaged in it. I never believed that I would be in the rooms that I was in making those deals and really figuring out how to drive that business. And just overall, I think it was the best part of it was probably the people and the relationships that were developed over time.
How do you think the industry is kind of evolving as you look back? We're also going to go into you had an entrepreneurship streak, or you have done a lot of entrepreneurship throughout your career. But how do you think this TV would change, flow TV, online entertainment, YouTube, and all of that? And how is kind of the industry adapting to this, I would say, ever evolving technology that we keep seeing?
It's an interesting question. I'll go back to what I said before. TV has always allowed itself to be defined by its distribution technology rather than its product. And content, IP, storytelling, whether it's sports, entertainment, news, is really what people are following. Yes, Netflix's IP delivered. It was the first streamer, but nobody goes there because of that. They go there because of the programming, the content, the IP that it delivers. So all of that is part of what we're trying to drive forward in this opportunity. And the challenges that everyone else now faces is quite amazing, because the economic model has been so strong over the years that that transition is always the hardest thing. The peaks, the valleys and the peaks are always the hard part of the world that you try and create here. So to me, the biggest challenge is current legacy providers that are huge media companies that are tied to old models, old economics, old infrastructure, and how they are able to transition their entire business models, their stockholders, all of the things that they have to change. They're going to be a real challenge for people.
Do you think it's going to be more, how would you say, platform agnostic, or would it really go to online and flow TV? I mean, there's been this kind of debate in America, because you were, at least, I mean, you still is a very strong flow TV when it came up in the 50s and 60s and so forth with entertainment and media group. But how's that kind of evolving? You think is really a dramatic change to platforms, or would it just go into a variety of platforms and new services and all that?
Well, if you look at, particularly in the US, but I think this is happening around the world today, you have 3 or 4 global players. You have Netflix, you have Amazon, you have Apple, maybe Rakuten, some others around the world. I'm probably missing one. Then you have US dominant, whether that's Disney or Warner Media or NBCU. And most of those companies now have decided that they're all going to make content for themselves. So that's why you see this process of 5, 6, 7, streaming apps or a way to get your channel, way to get your content that is like yesterday's channels. You change an app like you used to change a channel. Obviously, the big gatekeepers that used to be cable companies like Comcast and others, Liberty Global, are trying to hold on, and Apple, Amazon, and others are trying to become the new bundlers. So I think we're going to go through a period of 3 to 5 years where we'll have these walled gardens or fortresses, and then we'll come out of that into a rebundling of content, because the consumer is always going to need a way to sort through their choices. And there is the paradox of choice is certainly real.
And they have a lot of needs, and they want to see sports. So it's just a question of whether that would be available, right? So what other trends do you see in the industry? And when you look at it, I mean, throughout your career, what are some of the future trends you see in, in streaming and entertainment? And we know it is getting disrupted, as you said, and time will show. But what are some of the key trends that you're watching in your industry?
Let's take entertainment first. I think the importance of technology and the user experience in UI is new to a lot of people, and discovery is the most important thing. You think about it at Hulu, we had, I think, 35,000 titles or shows, and the average consumer only ever saw, and when I say saw, I mean at some point in time it crossed the screen with a promotion, a slate or whatever it is, about 4.5% when I started, about 8.5% when I left. So that means that 92% of the content on the platform was never even seen by most of the customers. So the discovery process, the amount of technology that's going to go into recommendation engines, to search, to discovery, to all those things, is going to be super important. Voice is a trend that I think will ultimately make today's hard to search, hard to discover world obsolete relatively fast. I think also you will see the operating system move from an outside or off TV box to inside TV boxes. Many companies now, Hisense, Vizio, Sony, that are all using their own use their own OS inside the television. So I think technology is going to continue to be a big trend that more and more people are going to drive, which includes all the things you hear about with AI and machine learning. I think on the content side, the trend you're going to see is big will get bigger. Game of Thrones, these huge $100 million movies that really are an episode. I mean, the final episode of Game of Thrones cost nearly $100 million to make, about 65 minutes of television. That's really amazing. So I think you'll start to see much bigger programming come out. Amazon has Lord of the Rings, where they paid $250 million just for the rights. They're going to, it's probably before they get on the screen, they're going to have invested about $400 million in that. So technology on one side is so important that you have to find it, you have to know what it is. And then things that the production and the IP will just get bigger and bigger, and the smaller stuff will get lost. That's what I think in terms of, I'll cover sports quickly. I mean, like, I think sports is a place where you're going to see that 360 world come together, where inside of your experience, you're going to be able to have some gaming, you're going to be able to have sports betting, you're going to be able to buy tickets, you're going to be able to buy merchandise, you're going to be able to interact with the event. So you're going to see a real 360 view of the sports world. I think you're starting to see it already in some of Europe and some of the EPL and the rest of it, and that will move across the globe as well.
So that seems to be very suitable for our devices and different channels as kind of consumers would get around. Yeah, I want to jump from. I mean, you served so many years with Fox, but then you decided to. What made you decide to start your own company and you became an entrepreneur?
Well, this is strange things happen. I went to Hulu as CEO, and we had a very, very strong run of success for a few years. I was lucky, surrounded by some great people. We were at the right time in the right place to really drive that business forward. And we were in a place where we got probably we're about 3 years ahead of the our planning process. Disney decided ultimately to buy Hulu, and Disney looks at Hulu and other things as a brand versus a business. So they didn't need a full staff. They absorbed many of the functions of what a CEO would normally do. So we agreed that it was a good time for me to go and do some things. Of course, it was February 28th or the first week of March of 2020. I wasn't expecting a pandemic to put us on the sidelines for a while. And in that period of time, I had been in the corporate world for a very long time, big companies, doing different things. And I wanted to sit back and really have a portfolio of things that I was able to do. And particularly, there were specific areas that I wanted to learn about. I wanted to learn about gaming. I didn't know enough about that. I wanted to know about sports betting. I wanted to learn about private equity from the private equity side. So I was able to advise and consult for Activision, for Wynn Resorts and Wynn Bet, and then advise a few private equity companies on a variety of deals in the process. And in that, I also ended up being asked and being an advisor to McKinsey in this process. So the consulting side has been interesting. I also, and how I'm a scholar, came through and in a program at Harvard myself, because I wanted to go back into a learning environment. I wanted to really put myself out there to try and do something more than just business. So I'm in a program for advanced leadership and with impact on social impact. So that's a year-long program. Like you, the first January through June was all online. So that was an interesting process. And I just landed here in Boston a week ago, and we start the second half of the program tomorrow.
Well, fantastic. So how does it feel to go back to school again?
Yeah, strange. It's easy to plan. It's easy to plan your calendar, and because it was online, you think you can do more than you thought. And what you forget about is the preparation for the class, the reading, the other things that go into it. So I will say that one of the elements of myself and I think my career that has allowed me to be in the right place at the right time at times and get lucky and be surrounded by great people that can help is my desire and my willingness to always learn, to learn more, to read as much as I can about whatever the topic is that's out there. So the opportunity to go back to school and really dive into and go deep in the areas that are so critical to the world today. There's so much that needs to be done, and the generations behind us are going to have so much work to do. I thought it was a good time to see if we could find ways to help and have an impact beyond just shareholders and others in the process.
Fantastic. And to the audience, thanks for your questions. They keep coming in. We'll just get the first one here from Sankita. How does it feel to be an influential TV personality? That's for you, Randy.
Yeah. It's strange, and I wouldn't actually say I'm an influential TV personality at all. I think that I've been lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time on a few occasions, and put teams together that allow us to go out and be successful on the business side, which has been great, and it's been exciting. I'm actually probably more excited about the next 10 years than I have been at any other point in my life, because to me, the opportunity where I sit today to go out and help other people have an impact, see if we can find ways to solve some of the, or at least attack some of the larger complex problems that we all face today is going to be super interesting. So ultimately, it's I don't really think about that aspect of it all that much.
Fantastic. So back on your journey as a leader, and we'll also get back to the Harvard side a bit later here, but who influenced you to become the leader that you are today? And did you have any role models, when you're a young graduate and your career track takes off, and everyone talks about these CEOs out there, and we had a good professor, or I knew someone, I met someone in my early years of my career. I mean, what influenced you on your leadership journey? I mean, did you have role models throughout?
Sure. And one of the things we can all do, I think, a better job of, is be conscious in the moment. And not every boss you have, not every person you meet is going to be perfect. They're not all going to, provide you the guidance or the learning that you're looking for. But that's about them. You can make sure that you're conscious of what you take from that person, whether it's what to do or what not to do, how to do some things in the process. So throughout your journey here, I think it's really important to just try and be as conscious and present in whatever you're doing and whoever's around you, and always be taking in signals and knowing where you want to go with them. I was lucky enough to have, several, people who were terrific bosses, but also were people who at times they weren't, what I took from them wasn't necessarily their direct leadership. It was more about how they looked at the world. They had a broad view of the world. They weren't so vertical that they could only see one thing. So that allowed me to widen my aperture of how I looked at things. And what was interesting that is the more you see, the more information you have at the top of the funnel, the tighter and better you can make decisions at the bottom of the funnel. And I think being able to see how things come together is going to be a very big asset going forward. But just to name a couple, Chase Carey, who was at Fox for a long time. Obviously, I had the good fortune of working in companies that, were run by, entrepreneurs and innovators in Ted Turner and Rupert Murdoch for a long time. Going way back. And then there was one boss, Peter Chernin, was ran Fox for a long time. And his particular skill set that I remember the most, he was wonderful. He could, wide view of the world. We used to go meet, and he was always backed up. His schedule was tight. So you'd go over to his office. It was a beautiful office. And you may end up waiting 15 minutes, 25 minutes, a half hour, 40. Sometimes you waited a long time to get in. But the moment you sat down, he had the ability to make you feel like the only thing he thought about the last 24 hours was what you were going to talk about in that minute. And I think that ability, again, to show somebody who's coming to see you, who's coming to do something, that you cared enough to prepare for them, that you read whatever the advanced materials were, that you thought about them as much as you believe that they thought about you, was a wonderful way to really see how people wanted to be treated.
How did you deal with failure throughout, and what did you kind of learn from it? You had all these good mentors and an incredible career, but when you look back at reflections of kind of failure and the role that potentially played throughout.
Look, failure on every level, today is much more celebrated than it was at one point in time. I was listening to a podcast the other day by Chamath Palihapitiya, and he has now replaced winning and losing with basically failure and learning, right? And he's using that like fail, learn. So it's all part of the process. It's like everything else. To me, early on, I had some relative success early on in my career. Ultimately, left a company, as I would say, it was just time, and the ability to reflect on that situation, not as failure or not as something that is negative, but as an opportunity to either rebuild, to learn, to think about what went wrong, to reimagine yourself if there are parts of you that helped create that failure in that. And it doesn't happen. That's not something that you wake up the next day and go, okay, got it, I learned this, this, and this. It takes some time. It does take some reflection. But one of the things that I probably learned the most through a high level failure was, it's not only important what you do, it's also important how you do it. So if you go out and you are wildly successful and it's because you have left, a scorched earth everywhere behind you, at some moment in time, you're going to look around and realize that maybe it wasn't all worth it. So I think how you do it, how you get there, the people you're with is a super important element of how successful are or what ultimately is you accomplish. And I think that's one of the things that this particular story, really taught me, was that, people matter. Ultimately, you can always reflect on doing things better, do things. You need an incredible amount of resilience in this life anyway, so you might as well build it internally.
We live in a world, and I think that also goes with the students here today, that where everything is it's going so fast, and it has to be so perfect, and it's very glamorous, very visual, it's very real time, it's very instant. But as I'm hearing you, we should embrace failure. We should learn from it. We shouldn't be afraid of it, because it will eventually happen throughout.
Yes, and look, I don't, this kind of fail fast mentality. Which on one level is true, but look, winning and succeeding is great. And you do want to learn along the way. And if you learn because you're, Thomas Edison and you failed at electricity 1,000 times, that's one way to look at it. But you want to make sure that as you move along, you're doing things the right way, and you're reflecting on how you're succeeding in what you're doing. Because inside a business, inside a company, if it's your own, there's only so many true failures that you can pull off. So my sense is, make sure that you're thinking about that risk as you go into certain areas and certain opportunities where you may fail.
When I look at the business schools and colleges, universities today, entrepreneurship is taught is one of the it's always one of the kind of the top electives and one of the top classes at school. Entrepreneurship. And do you think anyone can become an entrepreneur? And what does it really take? I mean, can you learn it? Can you adapt to it? And I mean, you braced into it yourself, but can anyone become an entrepreneur?
Yes, some people it's easy and it's natural. Some people it's hard, and it is something that they may not enjoy as much as the structure or the infrastructure that other areas bring them. But I think if you're committed to it, if you have an idea, if you want to see it through, you can certainly do it. What I would say is that, some people, and particularly generationally, I think over time, it's much more natural, to today's generation than it is to probably mine in the scheme of things. But there's nothing that stops anybody from doing, and taking something that they want to do. You just got to make sure you want it enough. And the good news, I guess, is the world and reality will throw enough obstacles at you that it will challenge you to determine whether you want it or not pretty fast.
Fantastic. I want to take a different tack here, and I see that also goes with some of the questions that we are getting in. And again, to all our delegates, thanks for and keep it flowing. There's one question here. There's always like this common concern from young graduates is this kind of inability to maintain, work-life balance. What's your view on work-life balance, and how do you maintain that balance between, private and work? And
I'm probably not the best person to ask at that. I think there are, long, there's a couple decades of unbalanced work life in my history. And I guess it comes back to just know what you want, right? Balance doesn't mean the middle, right? Balance just means being in a place that you're comfortable with and you're happy with. And, it's not somebody else's position to judge where you are, what you're doing. So I think it comes down to the individual really understanding who they are and what they want, and then finding that place that works for them. I've spent a lot of time with private equity in the last year, and there's also been a lot of noise about how much private equity and investment banking are paying and working people. And the theory there is, well, work 100 hours a week, 80 hours a week today, you're young, you're got all this going, we're going to teach you this business, and 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 10 years from now, you'll find the balance that makes sense. And for some people that may be okay, right? And for some people it may not be. And I think you have to know who you are and then find that place that allows you to live as authentically as you can in the scheme of things. And I'll also say that there are a lot of people out there that are committed to doing things, and some people have an amazing capacity to be productive and get things done and focus on what they want, and that's their balance. And if some other people want to make sure that they have more leisure time, more vacations, more experiences, or they want to be able to integrate their work life into all of that, that's another way to do it, particularly in a world where digital nomads or reality, remote working is a reality. Those are all things that allow you to create or I should say allow you to design your own work-life arrangement.
I remember when Malcolm Gladwell came out with his very famous book. There was one, again, I quoted all the time, you need to pull in, I think, 10,000 hours plus to be good at something, whether you're in sports or whether you're in management or whatever, right? So but maybe it's not the number of hours, but as I'm hearing you're going to build your own model, but of course you shouldn't be afraid of kind of pulling yourself in here to the fray.
No, and look, whether you're wherever you're at school or whatever you're doing, you're working and you're finding your pace. Just try and be thoughtful about who you are in this process, and don't put yourself in positions where you're doing things that may not be who you are for someone else.
Fantastic. There's one question here from the students, and thanks. We have a good flow here. You emphasized how important people are for the success of an organization, and can you describe the process of putting together such teams and inspiring them as well as incentivizing them as a leader? And what are some of the most important traits that one needs to be able to have as a leader here? So maybe on the notion of teams and incentivizing and building for success.
Yeah. And this is something that for me has certainly evolved over time, and hopefully everyone learns. But look, you cannot do anything as a partner, friend, team, business without great people. And you need great, as others have said, you need great people at every position if you're going to be successful in today's world. The world is punishing, the global markets are punishing, the economics are punishing, every part of the competitive nature set are punishing, and you need great people, right? And so you have to, as a leader, you have to take it upon yourself to recruit, identify, nurture, develop, train. You can't push it off to people. You have to be part of that process. I think the things that stand out for me, and they didn't always stand out in particular orders, so that they morph over time, is one, you need a level of optimism that is contagious. Nobody wants to follow somebody who is cynical or pessimistic or any of those adjectives. Now, you have to have some reality, you have to have some rationale for your optimism, but you have to believe in what you're trying to do. And one of the most important things over time I've learned is, if you can align people around a common ambition, an elevated mission that is easily articulated and vividly communicated over and over again, you will find great success and alignment within people. So optimism around an ambition and creating alignment around an ambition is super important. The other is, and this, I was not always, I didn't always think about this as one of the first, is empathetic. And you need empathy to really try and understand the people you're in charge of, or you're responsible for, or who are working with you, so that you have a better understanding of them. And that doesn't mean that you're sensitive to biorhythms or whatever. It just means that you understand where they're coming from, which allows you to have some shorthand, allows you hopefully to work your way through better decisions in the process. So optimism, empathy, an elevated mission around ambition that's easily articulated. You need to have open, honest, and candid, respectful conversation. If nobody in the room is willing to tell you that you're wrong, it's awful. If, again, as the old saying goes, if you're the smartest person in the room, or you think you're the smartest person in the room, change rooms, right? So you need to be able to have people around you who can have candid, courageous, respectful conversations about whatever the idea, the opportunity, the innovation, might be. I think you have to have groups, and you have to create a level of accountability, right? And you have to be accountable to your shareholders, to your board, to your partners, but most importantly, you have to be accountable to each other. Right? If you can create an organization that's optimistic, has empathy, is aligned around an ambition, is willing to have courageous, candid conversations, and is accountable to each other, that they know that the work has to get done, they know that has to get done, you're gonna win most of the time. And then the last four that I will kind of walk through, is that I really have stuck as my kind of filters, is whatever process you can create to have an absolute disciplined, relentless focus on getting things done and execution. And in the simplest way I can put this is, you do what you say you're going to do. right? And you put those things together, I think it's an incredible opportunity to elevate people, because without them, there's no success, there's no accomplishment, there's very little to do. And as someone who's run a couple of different businesses and done a few things, I've learned over time, it is so much easier when you spend your time making sure that you have great people in place than doing it yourself or thinking you can do it yourself. You're going to win much more often than not. So those are probably the ways I think about leadership these days, and why I think people are just so important.
So how do it seems like as a leader, as you said, I mean, empathy, authenticity, but you're also going to show the way, you're going to keep up the morale, sometimes in times of adversity and challenges. How do you motivate yourself? Because in the end, you are the leader with a title, whatever, but in the end, people are going to look at you as a leader, right? What's your source of inspiration? How do you motivate yourself?
One, you have to have that mindset of optimism. You have to believe, well, let's put it this way. If you don't believe that what you're doing or what you're attempting to do or what you're facing, you can do, then you're probably in the wrong spot. So you have to believe that you can do that, and you have to be able to lift up others when the challenges are there and when sometimes you're there. And you come back to, you have yourself, right? You have your family, you need some people that you can talk to and communicate with honestly, that may not be inside the company. It may not be, on the board. It may not be there, but there are people that have helped you over your career, whether they're friends or others. So you do that, and you need to be resilient in the face of adversity and challenges, and think your way through how you're going to get this done. And again, I think to me, when you come back to these filters, oftentimes the best thing to do when you hit some of these obstacles is pull the group together and just face them and talk to them. And what you quickly realize is there's only one way to go, right? You can only go forward. So you have to choose how to best do that.
Fantastic. And maybe on that note, a question here from one of our delegates. When you decided to start the FHPAIR company, how do you maintain your morale throughout the first year of your journey when you lost money with obviously the uncertainties of the pandemic of the 2020?
It's weird, quite honestly, because again, everything was on Zoom. I did, a tremendous amount of just so many video conferences that I think there's a point in time where you just can't do it anymore. I also had a window of time where I had planned to step back, so that made it easier. I didn't, the economics of it didn't matter much, so I didn't have to think. I didn't have to think about that element of it. And to me, it was exciting. It was a way to learn, which I love to do. It was a way to really dive deep into areas that I knew on the surface, but really didn't have a depth of knowledge. And that drove me throughout this. It was a way to spend time, doing what I'm doing inside of this program. So other than my own, it's probably armchair psychology, other than my own, my own internal voice and mind about the feeling that, this is obviously one of the biggest crises we'll ever face. And, I felt like I should be doing something more impactful. I should be helping Hulu or helping some of the other, in that window of time. So that was an up and down roller coaster. But other than that, it's worked out pretty well.
Fantastic. Very good question. And maybe on that note, how have you navigated the balance between making business and creative decisions that are stable, for example, in terms of expected success or revenue, versus more innovative but even riskier decisions here? How to balance that kind of stability versus taking on risk and, approaching new stuff here? How do you maintain that balance, and what's your approach to that?
Well, I probably lean more towards risk than just status quo. And look, any risk you're going to take, anything you're going to do, the one thing I said, the one thing we know, and many companies are still fighting this, but the one thing we know is the future is going to win. Right? There's nothing that you may slow it down, you may hold it off for a while, but it is in the end, the future is going to win. So the more you can lean in to that future, the more you can look at how your business can transition into whatever that next model is. Is your business sustainable over 5 years, right? Will the technology hold up? Will the pieces of it hold up? Are the people, can you attract, can you do different things with the people to make them part of the process? Those are all things you have to lean into. So to me, you have to be smart about how you evaluate those risks. You have to put them through the filters that allow, whatever filters you have in place, that allow you to determine if it's worthwhile in the economic climate that you're in. You have to make sure that you have the ability to take the risk. If there's no capital available, then you can't do it to begin with. And how you find that capital is important. So to me, I am a believer in storytelling. I'm a believer in creativity. I'm a believer that there are many times where you have to make a bet on people. In entertainment, most of the time you're making a bet on a person, a writer, a director, a filmmaker, a producer, a talent, right? And you have to make that bet. You better have done your homework and have understood what the downside is and shared what the downside is in that process. So make sure you have your filters, make sure you know your economic level of ability to take that risk, and then do everything humanly possible to mitigate the risk that you can. And we had one former boss who, every time we came in with something new, all he wanted to know was what was the ultimate downside? Like, how bad could this get, right? And of course, we've all learned over the years that you actually never put on paper how bad it could actually get. Not because you don't want to, but just because it could always get worse than you think on some level. But then we started talking about, like, okay, if that happened, where does that put us? And I think it's a great way. That's another tactic that allows you to determine, can I really sustain and move forward if this risk doesn't pay off?
So another question here from one of our delegates. If you could, Randy, what's the one piece of advice you would give to your 24-year-old self?
Take myself less seriously. Each moment we're in is the biggest moment in our lives, oftentimes in our own belief. And we all like to believe we're the stars of our own movie. And I think the more that we realize that, there's time, and while time moves quickly, what happens at 24 or 27 or 30, if it's positive, that's great, but that may not be what defines you. If it's negative, not so great, but it doesn't mean anything either. There's always time to come back. There's always time to build something. And so I would say two things. I would say one, just power through, and two is develop a level of ability to be self-reflective, to be resilient, and to be thoughtful about continuing to learn everything you can.
What piece of advice would you give students who want to enter the media, entertainment, sports industry? I mean, what should they be looking for? What should they aim for? What piece of advice would you give them?
I'd say go for it. I mean, it's a great industry. It's a creative world. Think about how many different ways you can touch this industry. The business of the industry is in a complete state of flux right now. So the business side is a way to get in. The creative side is a way to get in. Technology inside of the entertainment business is something that hasn't really been focused on for 40 years. And now all of these companies have to become technology companies as well. And we always get asked this question: is it media? Is it technology? Is it entertainment? And I think it's just kind of a false question at this point in time, right? The Ford company in 1904, was that a car company or a technology or a production company? What was it? If you can't be great at the technology of making content and distributing your content and developing relationships with consumers, you're not going to have a business. So every company today needs to be on the forefront of whatever technology is going to drive the success of their business. So think of the entertainment business as you would any other business. It is a broad business that has many component parts, from the creative and talent side to the business and legal side, to the production and physical infrastructure creation side, to the technology distribution, revenue models. So you can be pretty wide in the process. And look, study as much as you can about the companies, and think about the companies that are going to be the growth engines of the next decade. So I always tell people, like 10 years ago, there was Google and Facebook and Apple and others, and they're still killing it, Facebook. But the companies today that to me are so interesting that I think will lead entertainment tomorrow are companies like Epic Games and Tencent and Riot and Roblox and Stream out of Seattle. This theory of the metaverse, this theory of an environment where you'll be able to interact with things. Those are interesting companies for what's going to happen next. And those are companies that I believe will drive things, Roku and the distribution side. So think about those companies that are going to really drive the entertainment engine for the next 10 years versus jumping on the companies that are going to be here that were, the last 10 years.
When you look back at your life and career, is anything you would have done differently? Question from one of our delegates.
I would have listened. I would have listened to others more and longer. Probably over the years, there were lots of times when I probably thought I knew more than I did, and I would have been much better off listening.
I guess that also comes with leadership throughout life, that you kind of start to listen and, maybe take a back seat at times. So very good. Randy, tell us just here, we are coming up to the hour here, but we mentioned in the beginning the exciting program that you are at Harvard in terms of leadership. How long time is the program, and what are you getting out of it? And tell us a little about it here as we are closing up.
Well, it's the Harvard Advanced Leadership program. It focuses on social impact. So it's a year-long program, normally here in residence here in Boston. We did it online for January through June. We have covered topics in deep, from race relations to income inequality to climate change to resilient cities, technology, education, all of the areas in particular that we have so much work to do. And to me, it was interesting. It thrust me back into a learning environment again. It put me in a place where, there were times it made me excited, uncomfortable, not knowledgeable, misguided, all of those things. And now we're heading into the second half. And in this, you come out, your goal is to really come out with a view of what you want to do going forward. And one of the things that I perceive is missing in this is this world of storytelling and narrative and problem solving, and how you bring people together. The world is so divided today. We are all just kind of yelling at each other and not persuading anybody to do anything. And I think storytelling is an element of that we can bring together. And going back to other companies, and when you think about streaming companies, most people think about Hulu and Netflix and Disney and Amazon. Nobody's really thinking that much, as I said, about Epic Games or Riot, but nobody's thinking in the same mindset about Masterclass or Coursera or Chegg or any of these education companies either. And I think those are companies that are going to drive the future, help us drive problem solving. And all of them are going to need the ability to bring storytelling into their process. And part of what I'm trying to figure out if we can create is an intelligent nonfiction production world that helps simplify, organize some of these massive structural problems we have in society today, and maybe in some way, shape, or form bring a couple people together to help solve it.
Fantastic. That sounds truly exciting, and we'll watch very closely about the output as the program comes to an end. That sounds very exciting. Also a year of reflection and discovery and all that. So aside from coming up to the hour here, we're gonna finish shortly. But what's next, Randy? I mean, Harvard's gonna come to an end of the years, and what are you working on? What's next? What's the two different things, and what's 2022 and where
we will see. I have there's a couple projects that will be interesting. One's potentially, I want to spend some time in the not-for-profit world. I want to spend some time in building this production and entertainment and nonfiction programming company out. I want to continue to advise. So I've taken the approach now that I want to have more of a portfolio of things that I'm interested in, and no one point of failure. I think I've moved beyond that like one point of failure. So I think the more things that I can be doing that are interesting, the better.
Fantastic. Randy, we are grateful. I think this conversation has been fantastic. I just wish we'd had more time, but I'm sure we're going to meet again at some point in time. And this is under normal circumstances. We have had a big round of applause. Obviously, we can't give it to you in this online world. I guess that would miss, but this was truly rewarding. Thanks for opening it up and give us a lot of advice. It's been very stimulating. I'm monitoring the back end of questions and comments from our delegates from all over the world. They truly enjoyed it. So I want to thank you for the conversation, for your openness and for your contribution to HPAIR. It was really great to have you here.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure. I enjoyed it immensely, and I'm happy to actually be learning a little about HPAIR along the way as well. So I'm sure we will hopefully continue the conversation. Thank you very much to everyone.
That was fantastic. Randy, thanks very much. And to all the delegates, thanks a lot. I wish you a good program ahead. I think you and I hope you had some very stimulating, inspiring, thought-provoking sessions throughout the weekend and in the conference, which is still ahead of you. I enjoyed it, and thanks to Randy. And I wish you all the best of luck ahead with the program, but also your ongoing studies, your career, and your life. So see you out there. Take care and enjoy.
So long.
Thanks very much.